Hey everyone, Rob Janicki here, author of Slacker, 1991, Teen Spirit, Angst, and the Generation It Created. Out now wherever books are sold, published by Inspired Girl Enterprises. Documentary eventually being made about it, so all good things about the book. And I wanted to make this video about, when people talk to me about the book, it's obviously about grunge and alternative of the early 90s and chronicles the entire decade. But there's cultural elements, there's stuff about my life in there. But one thing that people, especially if they're of a certain age, probably 50 and older, I'd say, my age, there's a mixtape that is at the center of this book. I received a mixtape in 1989. I was in high school, and a buddy of mine named Pat gave me the tape. He was a guy that I think a lot of us who love music, he was one of those guys that everybody sort of knew in their own lives. They had their own version of Pat, who knew all of the music before the rest of the world knew the music. Somehow, some way, there's always somebody like that. Pat was that guy. And on this cassette tape, and I wish I could find it. It's either somewhere buried in my house or maybe in my mom's house in Brooklyn, but I'm going to make it a point to find it if it still exists. Anyway, I wrote about it extensively in the book because it was the thing, the actual physical thing that contained the music that wound up becoming the music that became the most important to me and eventually saved my life in many different ways. And so I wanted to talk about the tape in not in sequence or not in order, and without it, I don't remember exactly every song that was on it or the order of the songs, but some of the bands that were absolutely on the tape. And again, this is 1989. Nirvana, Soundgarden, Jane's Addiction, Violent Femmes, Sonic Youth, Buffalo Tom. There are others that will come to me. Faith No More, I believe. So as you can see, I think Pixies were on there as well. You can see there's a lot of stuff that in 1989, not many people knew about, but a few years later, just about everybody knew about. And I'm going to highlight a few of the songs. The one I'm going to start with, actually, it's a band I'm going to start with because I think there were two songs from this band, and it was one of these or two of these three songs. The band was Soundgarden. The album was Louder Than Love. And the songs that represented that album on this mixtape were either Loud Love, Hands All Over, and or Big Dumb Sex. Two of those three songs were on the cassette. It's one of the reasons I need to find it because I want to remember exactly. But that was my first exposure to Soundgarden. And at the time I was listening to heavy music, I was listening to metal, I was listening to hard rock, I was listening to a lot of rap at this time as well. Punk had sort of found its way to me, you know, in the mid to late 80s, probably mid 80s. So when I heard Soundgarden, it was familiar, not them themselves, but the sound, you know, heavy guitars, big drums, you know, big screaming vocals. But there was something about it that, even though it was familiar, there was something different. There was something new. The singer's voice, as now we all know, was Chris Cornell. But at the time, I had no idea who he was. Got really, really high, like Robert Plant, Led Zeppelin high. But then got real gruff and real aggressive. Guitars were heavy, sludgy, and thus, you know, some of the terms that surrounded the grunge movement. Strange timings in the music, you know. Matt Cameron was the drummer, and we eventually figured out what a great drummer he is. But the time signatures, it was kind of off, it was different. Again, the heavy sound was familiar. This is heavy music, hard rock, heavy metal, whatever you want to call it. But it was different. And there was an element of fear. There was an element of, I don't know what's going to happen next in this song. It didn't really follow many formulas like, you know, verse, chorus, verse. I mean, that's there, but if you're here, and yeah, you have to remember too. I was 16 years old, I guess, and in high school, and everything is new, and it's even now, all these years later, it's hard to really explain the significance of it, but it was really, really significant. So I immediately fell in love with Soundgarden, and what was cool about those days, though, once you liked something musically, there was no internet, there was no streaming, no Spotify, no Apple, none of that. It wasn't even a thought. You had to go to record shops and find this music, and that's what I did. And so I got copies of most of the bands that were on this tape of my own eventually. I was still listening to Sony Walkman back then, for the most part. Probably had a CD player too, I think I did, but I was still listening to cassettes and vinyl. But cassettes were my means of listening because, walked everywhere, or I lived in Brooklyn, so I was on buses or trains, and it was mobile, and you throw it into the Walkman, press play, and off you went. So I had a lot of cassettes, and it started my journey to what became grunge and alternative, and then obviously with what happened with Nirvana in 1991, really 92 when they took over the world. This was all like a foreshadowing of that nobody really knew about. Another big impression that cassette had, Violent Femmes. The Violent Femmes, even now, I don't know how to really describe them. I've written about them a lot. I've seen them a dozen times. I mean, if you know their music, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's folk, country, punk, gospel, craziness. I don't know what to call it. They're one of the most unique rock bands or bands I've ever heard. Three-piece, guitar, bass, vocals, and drums. Drums were barely there. I mean, a snare, a cymbal, brushes, never heard anything like it. And again, this was 89, so what I was listening to on this cassette were songs off of their self-titled debut album from 1983. And that has the hit Blister in the Sun. It's probably the only song that everybody knows from Violent Femmes. But their catalog is massive. Their songs are incredible. Their albums are great, even through this day. Like everything they've done, I've always been a fan of. But hearing songs like Add It Up, Gone Daddy Gone, Blister in the Sun, and again, I wish I had the tape to remember exactly which ones were on it, but I immediately got that album, and I played the hell out of it. All of these, and this stayed true, what I'm about to say, this stayed true for the next, I don't know, 3 to 4 years, or 2 to 3 for sure. I wound up buying albums on cassette several times over, the same album, because I'd listened to them so much in the Walkman or in a car, on my boombox that I had in my room, that if you know anything about cassettes, the more you listen to them, the tape, the actual physical tape, either warped or just flat out came out of the plastic and became tangled and destroyed and whatnot. So you had to buy it over and over and over again. And that's what I did. So I've had several copies of most of the albums from, I'd say, 89 or 90 through 92, probably, or 93 even, before I really got into CDs. So you're welcome. Every band I've ever loved from that period on, I bought many of your albums many times over. So yeah, you're welcome. But so that's kind of, and as you can tell so far, I think, from this little video, this cassette had a really, really big influence on me and what I listened to. And eventually I'll do it in another video, but I'll get into Jane's Addiction, Sonic Youth, and of course Nirvana. The Nirvana song was about a girl, and I'll dedicate a video to that song. It was the only Nirvana song, I believe, that was on that cassette. Actually, I'll just kind of tell the quick version now. But it was a song that sounded nothing like anything else on their debut album, Bleach. Bleach was heavy, it was dark, it was menacing. About a Girl was a jangly sort of pop song, almost sounding like the Beatles in a way, with a little bit more edge. So when I went to the record store to buy that album, that's what I was expecting to find when I listened to it, and I got a totally different record. But I'll get more into that as time goes on. But just a little intro to the cassette that changed my life, changed my worldview in many ways, helped me become the person that I am, and ultimately was the centerpiece of this book that is available now everywhere books are sold, including my website, robjanicki.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.